Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which is going to be focused on deploying our Django web application to Flow. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I will be sure to attach all of the relevant links that I cover in this video tutorial in the description below. So what you want to do is you first of all want to head on over to flow.com. After doing so, what I want you to do is to ensure that you have a valid GitHub account and that you've created one. I will be sure to attach a link to GitHub where you can go ahead and sign up for an account. It's very straightforward, very easy. You're just going to sign up with an email that you will have already set up with creating your GitHub account. So basically what you should have open is you should have Flow open here on its home page. You should be on your GitHub dashboard page. And it would be helpful to have your email open, specifically the email that you've used to register your GitHub account. All right, so make sure you've got all of that set before you continue. Now, what I want us to do now is I want us to head on over to Flow and register an account or sign up. So we can say get started. Okay, so just give it a moment. It's just initializing, and here we go. So there are various ways in which we can sign up to Flow. We can continue with our Google account, we can continue with GitHub, or manually with an email address and then validate the email. So to make it simple and easy, we're going to say continue with GitHub. So make sure that you are signed into GitHub in the same browser window here. So I have a tab of it. So I'm going to say continue with GitHub. And what you're going to have to do here is you're going to have to authorize access to Flow via your GitHub account. So I'm just going to say authorize flow-core. Okay, it's going to redirect me. Okay, and there we go. So I should have also received an email here that says, okay, a third-party OS or application has been added to your account. So this is just based on Flow. Okay, perfect. So now we can scroll down and create a workspace. So we can set our name here instead of our email address. So I'm just going to say Arno. Then you can give your workspace a name here. So I'm going to call this the Cloud with Django. Something simple. And I'm going to agree to the terms and conditions of Flow. Then we can say create your workspace. Now we need to give our project a name here. So I'm going to call this CRM-application. Something simple. And we can say add your project. All right, so we can see here that we have a few things that we can do. We can deploy our code with GitHub. So essentially this would be following the steps of hosting our application with Flow. We can also create a background worker with GitHub, and we can create a Postgres database as well. That's something that we can do as well. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to create a Postgres database on Flow. So we can say create a Postgres database. Now we need to give our database a name. I'm going to call it production database. You can give it any name that you wish. And you can see here we get a free database included in our plan. And the region, I'm going to set this as US East, so Ohio. And then we can say create your database. So it's really simple. So let's just give it a moment and be patient as our database gets created. And there we go. So we can now see our database was created. Super simple and easy. We can see, however, we are limited because we are using a free version. We can see our storage size is limited to 3 gig. We can see some information in terms of the metrics and active time. However, we actually need to use our database a bit before we can actually move on ahead. We can see our workspace. We can see with the Cloud with Django, we're on the free tier. This is part of our application here, so our project. So if we go to CRM application, we can see here our apps. So in our apps here, we can see that we have our production database. And if we were to say add new, you can see we can go ahead and create a web application, which is going to essentially be the host of our application on Flow. And we already created a Postgres database. So this is our project with all of the resources that we have. So databases, our live server for our application, that's all going to be housed in this section right here. Now, of course, you are going to be limited in terms of usage. So what I'd recommend you do is upgrade if you want to have more space and to ensure that your resources extend after a certain period of time. So anyway, let's continue with our database. So we can click on production database. Okay, and of course, we can go to connection info. And here you can see all of the details for your database, such as the database URL, the host, the database name, the port, the user, the password, and if SSL mode is active. So as you can see here, all of these details we can configure within our Django application easily. We can either manually put it in, or we can use DJ database URL, which is a helpful package to automatically manage all of the data here in terms of the database name, the port, user, password, etc., without typing it in manually. Also, by settings, we can read a little bit more in terms of our database information, such as the name, the region, and here we'll be able to delete our database. Also, we can also head on over to scalability if we want to utilize the compute units and extend them, or ensure that we decrease them. So as you can see, we are limited by 1 gig of RAM with 0.25 virtual CPU. You can increase this, however, you're probably going to need to upgrade because usually there comes a fee with this. Okay, so that is in detail the service on Flow of a production database. So now that we've created a Postgres database on Flow, we can go ahead and connect this to our Django application. However, before we do that, we need to ensure that we install the necessary packages. So that is what we're going to have to ensure that we do next. Right, so before we can configure our database settings, we need to install various packages for our Postgres database so that it can be usable within our Django application. So what you're going to have to do is install the following packages. So first, psycopg2 binary. Now this is essentially a Python Postgres SQL database adapter. So it's going to allow us to use and utilize a Postgres database within our Django application. And of course, Django is based on Python. So what you can do is you can go ahead and install this package within your project's virtual environment. So go ahead and install that. Okay. There we go, so that's been installed, great. Then what we want to do is we want to install DJ database URL. So this is going to allow us to use database URLs in our Django application. This is a very easy way to connect your database. So as you can see in Flow here with our production database, all we would need to do is connect it via this database URL instead of manually adding in all these variables here to our database. So it's a very simple and easy way to simplify the process. So let's install this as well within our application. So you can say pip install DJ database URL. And there we go. So make sure that you've installed those packages, and then the next thing we're going to do is configure our database settings. So what you can do is you can go ahead and head on over to your application, so the application that you want to deploy. So we can then head on over to our main project settings.py file. So my project's called CRM, and I'm going to go to settings.py. And I'm going to navigate to where my default database is situated at. And here I have my default SQLite database. And what I'm going to do is just make sure my server is stopped. Yep, it is. And we can comment out this default database for the moment. And I'm going to put a comment here that says Postgres, so I know that there's a distinction between the two databases. Great. So what you're going to want to do now is say import DJ underscore database underscore URL. Okay, so that's going to import that package for us. After we've done that, we can go ahead and add in the following, which is databases equals. And within our curly braces, we can open that up and set our default database now, okay, accordingly. And we're going to use DJ underscore database underscore URL to parse the database URL that we have from Flow, and we can put that in quotes here. So we're now going to go to Flow, and this is the database URL that we want to add in, and we can copy that, head onto our application, and you want to paste it here in between the quotes, like so, and that's going to connect us to our Postgres database that is hosted on Flow. So just make sure that you've commented out any default database that you're using. So for most of you, it should be SQLite, and that is as simple as how you can do it. So to make sure that it's been connected, you can just run your server. So python manage.py run server. Okay. And you should see a message appear here saying you have 20 unapplied migrations. Now, as long as you see this message, that is a good sign that you are connected now to your Postgres database on Flow. So you're going to have to make your migrations again towards your new database. And that is natural. And this is a very good test to see if you're connected to your database. So now we can just go ahead and say python manage.py. migrate. So now we're going to make our default migrations towards our new Postgres database that we have just connected. So it's going to take a moment. So all we're going to have to do is just be a little bit patient as the process unfolds. So let's just wait for that to be completed. Right. So as we can see, our migrations were made, and just as a final test, let's just run our server just to make sure we don't have any issues. Perfect. All right, so everything is working as it should be, and we have successfully configured our database settings. So make sure that you've gone ahead and you've set all of that up accordingly as follows that we have set here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to want to focus on is we want to be able to configure our environment variables. So in order to configure our environment variables, we would need to choose a package. So whether it is Python decouple or Django environ, we need to choose a mechanism for setting up our environment variables. So I prefer to use Django environ since it's very simple and very easy to implement. So again, we want to go ahead and install this package. So we can stop our server and say pip install Django environ. There we go, so that's been installed. Now we can go ahead and initialize our environment variables. So you can head on over to your settings.py file, and right at the top, I like to do it just before this base dir declaration here, and I'm going to say import environ. Okay, and I just want to make sure, yeah, server's off, so just make sure your terminal's off. And now what you want to do, I'll actually add it in comments. If we want to initialize our environment variables. To do so, you need to say env equals environ dot env. Now remember, this is case sensitive, so you need to be very specific. Followed by environ dot env dot read underscore env with parentheses. So this is how you can initialize your environment variables. So again, just double check. I'd recommend that you import environ, that you say env equals environ dot env parentheses and environ dot env dot read underscore env parentheses. So like I said, it's case sensitive, so make sure you've got this set up correctly. All right, so now we can head on over to our projects directory. So wherever our settings.py file is situated, we want to create another file in this particular subdirectory here of CRM. So I'm going to right click, say new file. I'm going to call this .env. Now this is where we will house our environment variables. And while we add it and before we forget, we might as well create a .getignore file so that we ignore our environment variables when we deploy to GitHub. Well, not deploy to GitHub, upload our project to GitHub before we deploy to Flow, to be clear. So again, in the same directory, we can right click, say new file, .getignore. And all you want to do is ignore this .env file. So you can say .env, and that's going to ignore it for you. So make sure you've gone ahead and done so. So this is the .getignore file. All right, so let's go ahead and configure our environment variables. So in my project, it's very simple. I don't have a lot of sensitive information, but you can apply this to your project with sensitive information if you have it. So what we can do is we can start off with the obvious, our database URL. So I'm going to scroll down. And we can see we have this database URL exposed here in our source code. So what you want to do is you want to go to your .env file and create a environment variable. I'm going to call this database underscore URL and say equals. Then what you want to do is copy that database URL. So make sure you don't add quotes in your .env file. So automatically Django Environment adds quotes to whatever values you put in it. And you must also make sure you don't have any spaces in your .env file with Django Environment as well. So it's best to follow me explicitly. So I'm going to copy the value like so. And in the .env file, I'm going to paste it as is. Make sure you don't have any trailing spaces or you haven't done anything like that. It needs to be exactly as is. Very important. Okay, and I can go to the next line. That's fine. And that's fine. So now in settings.py, I can remove this value. And I can also remove these quotes. And all you want to do within the .parse now is you want to parse the environment variable that you set. So env within your parentheses in here, you want to refer to that environment variable name here, which is database underscore URL, and paste it in like that. So a good test to make sure your database is still working is to just run your server. Okay. And that's good. Another good test that you can do is you can change this environment variable name to the database URL and leave that as database URL, rerun, and it should come up with an error called improperly configured, which means that previously we set it up correctly and that it's reading the environment variable fine. So that's perfectly fine. So let's go back to env and remove the underscore. Say database URL, it's going to pick it up, rerun your server a final time just for clarity. And there we go. Working perfectly fine. Great. So we've got our database secured. The next thing I have is my secret key. So we can scroll up and we're going to do the same thing. Remember, we don't add in the quotes. So let's go to .env. Next line. And call it secret underscore key. Copy the value in between the quotes. Paste that in, no spaces or anything. And you can press enter if you wish. Then in the settings.py file, we can remove all of this. And you just want to say env within parentheses. You want to add in single quotes, and then we can refer to the environment variable as secret underscore key and paste that in. And now what we can do is we can run our server again. Okay, and there we go. Everything's working perfectly fine. So that is how you can go ahead and set up your environment variables. In this case, we are securing our database URL and our secret key as well. Perfect. So make sure you've got all of that set up and ready to go. So we've got that all set. So that is what we need so far in our application. We will return to the rest, but that's what we need for environment variables. Right. So the next thing we want to do is going to be very simple. We just want to test our admin user just to test our database. So we can go to our terminal and we can just say python manage.py create super user. Okay, and I'm going to call the super user admin 101. Skip the email, add in a password. Again. There we go. Now we can run our server. Let's do that. Perfect. Now we can head on to the application that we have. So this is my application of the chest. I'm going to go to admin. And what you want to do is just sign in with those credentials that you just created. Right. So once you've entered them in, you can go ahead and log in. So the fact that it's taking some time here is a good sign because that means we're connected remotely to our Postgres database. And as soon as we deploy our application on a server, it's going to be a lot faster. So don't worry about that. So as you can see, we have our application. If we go to users, we should technically only see one user in our application. And this is a good indication that we are connected to our database as well. And there we go. We can see we're connected to one user, and that's the admin user. So it's a very good and easy test to just validate that. Okay, so we've just gone ahead and tested our admin user just to check our database if it's connected properly, and we have confirmed that it is. Now, the next thing that we need to do is configure our static files with WhiteNoise. So based on my application, I have a static folder here that I've set with my CSS file and my JavaScript file. That's all I have just for these kinds of static files. And what we want to do to ensure we can serve this in a production environment is to use WhiteNoise. So what we can do is we can go ahead and look at the WhiteNoise documentation, which I'll include in the description below. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is install WhiteNoise. So in your terminal, within your virtual environment, you want to say pip install WhiteNoise and add that in. Perfect. Next, you want to add in the WhiteNoise middleware just below, or just after, should I say, the Django security middleware in the middleware list. So I'm going to copy WhiteNoise here. Then I want to head on over to my settings.py file, and you want to navigate to middleware. And just below the Django middleware for security here, you want to add in that middleware for WhiteNoise. You may need to just adjust the spacing, and that's what you need to add in. Perfect. Let's continue. So once you've done that, you want to add in the static file storage here for WhiteNoise. So you can go ahead and copy the following and head on over to settings.py, and I'm going to put this where my default static file settings are, and that is right here. So this is my default settings. I'm going to put it just here. So make sure you paste that in. Now the last thing that we need to do is we need to add in static root, and this is going to define where all of our static files should be stored when we are moving to a production-based environment. So I can call this static underscore root. And I'm going to set this as base underscore dir / and I'm going to call this static files. So essentially all of our static files are going to be housed in a new folder called static files, and that folder will appear in our base directory, which is going to be, let's just close this, which will be right here. So in our base directory here, we're going to create a folder called static files once we have ran the python manage.py collect static command to collect all the static files in our application. That includes the ones that we've created ourselves and all of the behind the scenes static files, such as those that come with our Django admin page, so we don't lose styling for the Django admin page, such as the CSS there and the JavaScript and everything behind the scenes. So that is essentially what we are doing here with static root. And to achieve this goal, we're using WhiteNoise. So we need to ensure that we also declare that static file storage variable as well. So make sure you've gone ahead and done that. So the next thing we need to do now is collect all of our static files. So what you can do is say python manage.py collect static and press enter. Now this process is going to take a moment usually, so we just need to be patient here because there's quite a lot of static files in our Django application, even on the default. So let's just wait for that. And there we go. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. So we can see 128 static files were copied to the following location. So like I mentioned, it will be in our base directory, and there it is. And you can see it has the admin CSS files, JavaScript files. That's why it's so much. And we can see our default CSS file that we have and our default JavaScript file that we have is also there. So just for clarity there on you on handling the static files itself. All right, so make sure you've gone ahead and set all of that up accordingly. That will be on our static files. Next up, we're going to focus on the deployment configurations that we need to set, and also some more information in terms of allowed host, CSRF, requirements.txt file, proc file, and all of that. Now let's go ahead and set up various deployment configurations, and let's set them up. So what you want to do is you want to install Gunicorn or Gunicorn, which is a WSGI HTTP server for Unix, and we can utilize this to bridge the connection and allow our Django application to communicate with the web servers on Flow. And this is going to help to achieve that goal. So what you can do is you can go ahead and install Gunicorn within your application, within your virtual environment to be specific. Okay, there we go. Now, the next thing that you want to do is create a requirements.txt file, and this will house all of the packages for our application. So what you can do is in your base directory of your project, you can say pip freeze the greater than symbol requirements.txt. So go ahead and run that command. Now, if you minimize your terminal, you can now see that you have a requirements.txt file, and this houses all of the packages in my application. Now, everything here should be roughly the same as yours here for the baseline. However, I have a specific package here called Crispy Forms, which I'm using for my own application needs. Everything else here you should have as well set if you've been following this tutorial. So something that I tell people always, make sure when you deploy your application, rather start off with a simpler project so that you're familiar with the environment and what packages don't cause issues or problems. So this is just a bit of advice for you in the future. Right, so now what we can do is we can generate a proc file. Now this proc file is essentially going to be used to start our Django application on Flow's web server. So we need to tell Flow to start and essentially deploy our application, and to ensure that we start this application we need like a start command, and to do so we can use a proc file. So in the base directory, what we can do is create a new file. It is going to be proc file. So it's case sensitive, so I'd recommend that you type it the same way I do, capital P and the rest lowercase. And here you want to enter in the following. So it's going to be web : and then you want to say space G-unicorn or goonicorn, and then you want to state the name of your project, mine CRM, but for clarity you can go to your settings.py file, and you want to look for this here. So whatever is here in the beginning, that's going to be what you're going to set in your proc file. So your Django project file, the original name of your Django project. And in the proc file, you can just start off by saying crm.wsgi. So this will be the start command to tell Flow to start our Django project. So make sure you've added that in as well. Right, very important. Great, so we've got that also set. Now, the last thing that we need to make sure that we do is in our settings.py file, you want to scroll up and we want to set debug to false. For the time being, allowed host, we're going to say all, so star. Now, the reason we're doing this for the time being is because we don't have a domain name, a default domain name. We will get one once we deploy to Flow, and then we'll just swap it out. We also need to set our CSRF trusted origins. Now, we can't set this here explicitly yet because we first need to get a default domain name. So in a comment, I want you to type in CSRF_trusted_origins, and we can just set that as blank. Okay, so we can also put in the default scheme, which is HTTPS://. Just for the time being, make sure that you comment this out, or else you might have an error when you deploy, but you need to make sure you've configured your settings as follows. So debug to false, allowed host star, so all for now. Make sure your secret key has been set accordingly and that you have this commented out. Now, this CSRF trusted origin is going to ensure that we don't have issues when we're making post requests. So sometimes when you're making post requests on an application that's deployed on a live server, you're going to run into a CSRF error. So it's best to make sure that you don't get any CSRF issues. So you need to set up a trusted origin, which we can only obtain with a default domain name from Flow. Okay, so make sure you set that up. Now, the next thing that we're going to focus on is we need to make sure that we push our application to GitHub. Now, we're going to use Git, so we're going to use Git commands to do this. So that's the next thing that we need to focus on. Right, so let's continue with the process. So now we're going to focus on pushing our application to GitHub. So the first thing I want you to do is to log into your GitHub dashboard, and I want you to create a repository. So I'm going to say create repository. Okay, and repository name here, I'm going to set this as, let's call this development. Okay, description here, I'm just going to copy that. Okay, I'm going to set it to private. I want to add a README file, and then I'm going to scroll down and say create repository. So make sure you've gone ahead and done the following. You've added a repository name. The description is optional. I'm going to set this to private, however you can choose public if you want. And I'm going to add a README file, and I'm going to create this repository. There we go. So our repository has been created. Now, since we're using a private repository, we may need to ensure that we have a personal access token. Now, this is going to allow us to push our source code to our repository here called development under our user account. In mine's called Cloud Developer 766. You'll have your own. So what you can do is you can go ahead and click here on the right corner of your profile icon, and you can scroll down until you see settings. So go ahead and click on settings. Okay. And then what you want to do is you want to scroll right to the bottom here. And on the left hand side, you'll see developer settings. Next, you want to click on personal access tokens. So you can click here on the drop down, and you want to choose tokens classic. Now we want to generate a new token here. So make sure you keep this private. And we want to generate a new token classic for general use. Okay, and now you just need to enter in your password for confirmation. Oh, I just need to enter in the right password. There we go. Okay, and now what you're going to do is you just want to give a name to your token. I'm just going to call this, so what's this for? I'm just going to say flow access, something random. You can set the expiration. I'm just going to set it to 7 days. Now the scope here is going to define the access for your token. I'm going to say repo here, so we'll have all the basic control here in terms of my repositories. And I also want to scroll down and set it to project here. So these are the settings I'm configuring, the permissions I'm giving to this personal access token. So on project and on repo here. So make sure that you've gone ahead and set up the following. Once you're done with that, you can scroll to the bottom and generate your token. Okay, there we go. So you can delete your token as well. That's what you can do as well. So what you want to do is you want to copy your token, and I'm just going to paste this somewhere. So I have a notepad file here, and I'm just going to paste that in for the moment. I'm just going to zoom in here so it's a bit clearer. It's a little bit too zoomed out for me. And there we go. So make sure you save that personal access token somewhere, and that's going to allow us to push our source code to our GitHub repository as a private repository. If you had a public one, you don't really need to do this, but just for safety, that is why we're doing this. Right, so now we can just head on back. So we can click on the following icon here on the left, and let's go to our repository. And here we are back. So make sure you've created that personal access token. Great. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and set up a Git. Okay, so we're going to use Git to essentially push our code to GitHub. So I'm going to ensure that I have Git installed. So I will ensure that I add this link in the description below. So it's at git-scm.com/downloads. So you can choose if you're on Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. I'm on Windows, and what I'm going to do is click on Windows, and I'm going to download the installer for a 64-bit Git for Windows. So I'm going to install that. So first I need to download it, of course, and I'm just going to wait for it to be downloaded. Okay, there it is, and I'm going to click on that. My screen might blur in a moment, so you might not see it on this recording here. So let's just wait for it to open up. And if that screen blurs, you just want to say yes to the security message for user account control. And then it will open up the setup here. So let's go through it. So we can say next. And the location here, just leave it on the default. I'd recommend next. Okay, if it does exist, you can say yes. If it doesn't, it will take you to the next step. So I'm just going to say yes. Okay, these are the settings that I'll keep it on. Well, the components to be specific on what should be installed. You can just mirror them like mine if you so desire. You can check what has been set here as you desire, or if you have experience, you can add and remove as you desire. Okay, we can then say next. Okay, start menu, Git, we can say next. The default editor used by Git is going to use Vim, that's fine, let's go next. Adjusting the name of the initial branch in your repositories, we can let Git decide. Next. Okay, adjusting your path environment, we're going to say Git from the command line and also from third-party software. So we can say next. Okay, choosing the SSH executable, we're going to use bundled OpenSSH. Next, we're going to use the OpenSSL library under the HTTPS transport backend. We're going to check out the Windows style commit Unix style line endings. That will be under the configuration for the line ending conversions. We're going to use Minty, the default terminal. Okay. We're going to leave it on fast forward or merge. We are going to use the credential manager, so git credential manager. We're going to enable file system caching. We're going to leave this on the default, so we're not going to configure any experimental options. And we're going to say install. So this might take a while to install for some of you. For others, it may pass relatively quickly. So we need to ensure that we install Git so we can utilize Git commands, and we're going to use Git bash to actually programmatically use these commands for our application. So what I'm going to do is just wait for this process to be completed, and then we will continue. So as we can see, Git was successfully installed, and I don't want to view the release notes. But what I do want to do is I want to launch Git bash. So we can say finish. And here we are. So we can see Git bash has opened up. Let's just minimize this, and let's just refine this. This is a little bit wide. Okay, so here we go. So here we are in Git bash. So what I'm going to do is just show you a command or two. So if we want to clear our terminal, we can do the following. And if we want to go to a specific folder, like our project folder, we can use cd or change directory to do so. So I already have my project folder here on the desktop called project CRM. And to show you the structure here, you can see I have project CRM here, which is what we see on my desktop. And within project CRM is my Django project called CRM here and my virtual environment. For clarity, if I open this up, you can see the structure here is set. And I want to go into CRM here, which is my Django project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Git bash here, and I want to say cd, and I want to go to the desktop first. So now you can see I'm on the desktop. So for clarity, I am right here. Now I want to go to project CRM. So I can say cd again, project-crm. And now I'm on the desktop in project CRM. Great. And now I want to say cd again. And I want to go into my Django project, which is called CRM. And now I'm on the desktop in project CRM, in CRM, which is my Django project name. And I can say clear. So make sure you're in your Django project, that you've set the root correctly, or the directory that you've set. Very important. So now we're going to add in the steps. So let's get started. So make sure that you have your personal access token ready and handy. So now let's just open this up. What we want to do is initialize Git first. So we're going to say Git, and then we're going to say init. Okay, so initialize an empty Git repository in the following directory. Then we want to add all of our files. So all of the files here was in CRM here. We want to add that to Git. So we're going to say Git add. You can add space, dot, and press enter. And that's going to add everything for you. There we go. Now there's a lot going on here. So let's just say clear. And that will clear it. Next, you want to make your commit. So I'm going to say git commit -m for make, and then in double quotes, I'm going to say first commit and enter. You can see all of the files within our application has been committed. Great, let's clear this up. Done. Now we want to set up our branch. So I'm going to say git branch. I'm going to say -m for make, and I'm going to call it main. So I want to make this branch. There we go. Now we want to add in the origin. So where do we want to push our source code to? So what we need to do first of all is say git remote add origin. And then what you want to do is you want to copy the URL for your repository. So this is my repository here. So it's at github.com, cloud developer 766. That's the username of the account. And then the repository name is called development. So you want to copy this, or your own one, not mine. And you just want to paste that in. Now, I just want to make this wider so you can see at the end, you need to make sure that you say .git. So let me make this wider so you can see. So make sure you add in .git at the end after you've copied that. Very important that you do that. And then what you can do is you can say enter. There we go. Now what we want to do is we want to push our source code to the branch that we have set up here, which is going to essentially push all of the code here to our main branch in GitHub. So what you want to do is the following. You want to say git push -u, and the origin, we're going to set that is main. So that is, of course, the branch that we configured earlier. And you want to say --force to make sure that it pushes it there. The reason I'm adding this in, because sometimes there are errors that don't allow you to do it. So you can press enter. And what's going to happen now is it's going to open up the credential manager for Git here. Or it's going to open up a link to connect to GitHub, should I rather say. And you can open this up and you can decide how you want to sign into GitHub. So I'm going to use that token that we created. So you can choose token. So we need to add in a personal access token to push this source code. I'm going to use this one here. And I'm going to paste that in, and you can say sign in. And if that was a success, it'll take a few more seconds. And as you can see here, it's pushing all of our code to that main branch here on our GitHub account. And you can see it's been pushed. So now if you go to GitHub, to your repository and refresh or reload the page, you can see now that your project files, everything has been pushed and uploaded accordingly, as you can see here. You'll also have a message in your email to give you some further details. So that's how you can essentially push your application to GitHub using Git with all of the following steps. All right, so make sure you've gone ahead and set that up accordingly and that you push your application to GitHub. Now, there are many ways you can upload to Git. So for those of you that don't have full-on experience, I'd recommend just practicing a little bit first if you're still a bit unsure. But this is how you can go ahead and one of the ways of going ahead and pushing your code to GitHub. All right, so that's how you can go ahead and do so. So make sure you've done that and that you've configured everything accordingly. And the next thing that we're going to do, of course, is we're going to ensure that we deploy our application to Flow. So that is what you can expect next. Right, so let's deploy our application to Flow. So what you want to do is you want to click on CRM application or the name of your project. Right, and we already have our database connected. Let's click on add new. To choose web application. Okay, and make sure that you're signed into GitHub so you can now easily connect your GitHub repo. Okay, it's going to open up a pop-up and we just want to install and authorize the Flow connector. So you can choose a select repository here and choose a specific repository, or you can set access to all repositories. I'm just going to say all repository just to keep it simple. And we can say install and authorize. Okay, it's going to connect. There we go. We can see it's been connected. Now it's going to show all the available repositories now. So here's the one I have called development, which I have set here. So you can just say connect. Now we can configure our settings. So you want to give your web application a name. I'm just going to call this CRM web app. We're going to select a branch to deploy it. We can keep it on main, so that is where our application is situated here. Okay, we can choose a region here, so I'm going to leave it at United States East. Then we want to set our environment variables here, so let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the following. So we can take a look here at our environment variables. If we look at .env, we want to copy that database URL. Add new variable, paste that in, and you want to copy the following value, paste that in, say add new variable here, and it will be your secret key, paste that in, add in the value associated, and you want to paste that in as well. So make sure you've gone ahead and added that in. That's all you're going to need to do. There are advanced options that you can go ahead and set here in terms of a Docker file and build pack. However, that's a little bit advanced and a little bit out of scope here. So make sure you've gone ahead and you've set that up accordingly as follows. Right, so as soon as you've configured everything as is, what you can do is you can scroll down and deploy your app. So just as simple like that, very easy, very straightforward, and there we go. So we can see our application is on the free plan. So we can see now it's also being set up and deployed. So the setup has been completed. It's now just building our application, and then it's going to, of course, deploy it. So you can see the speed here is quite astronomical, and it is very fast. So we can see it's going as it is set. So we can see all the information here in terms of it picking up GitHub and all of the necessities. You can see all the builds, and we can also see everything being built here and being exported and set up as we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait for this to be deployed, and then we can go ahead and continue. So we just need to wait for build and deploy. As you can see, all the checks passed. So setup, build, deploy, and we can see our application logs as well. So we can see our application was deployed successfully. So we can close this up. And just something I wanted to mention before, we can see that our application is on the free plan by default, and it'll automatically be paused after 24 hours of activity, and you can resume your application at any time under settings. So like I said, you are going to have limitations in terms of the free tier. If you plan on using an application for an extended amount of time, and if you want better resource usage, I'd recommend upgrading. So remember, you can't have something free forever. There will be constraints. Okay, so here's our application all set. We can see our first commit passed and it was deployed. Under usage metrics, we actually have to use our application a bit, and then we can read a bit more about the metrics in terms of CPU usage. We can also see our environment variables that have been set, and if we were to add new environment variables to our application, we can do so. We can also upload a .env file to upload everything at once, and if we've made those changes, we can save it. We can also see the logs for our application here. However, it's going to be limited, and you're going to have to upgrade to Pro for more logs. Under settings here, we can see some information in terms of whether we want to pause our web application. It's something you can do. You can also upgrade to Pro. You can see your application name, the source repository, the custom URL. So we have a default URL here. I believe you can modify this by changing it and saving it. The region here that we have set, and we also have automatic deployments here. So any changes that we make to our branch, so the branch here main, which is essentially this one here, okay, it's going to automatically deploy our application each time and go to the deployment section. You can also delete your web application if you so desire. That's something you can do as well. We can also see we have the opportunity to add in a custom domain and attach it to our Flow application. If you want to customize your build options, like I mentioned before, such as adding in build pack or your Docker file, you can configure that with the following parameters. And if you want to maintain your application in terms of scalability, you can add in more compute resources and set up a range of instances here with a minimum and a max. All right, so I've been through all of that. So let's actually see our application now. So here we have our application at the following link. So let's, looks like we need to actually paste that in. So let's click on this. All right, it's going to copy it. And let's just remove the default application that we had, paste in that. And there we go. We can now see our application, but it's now hosted at the following domain. And of course, we can see we've got that all set up and ready to go. However, we're not done just yet. We do need to make a change here just to ensure everything runs smoothly. So what you're going to want to do is you want to go to your application here on GitHub. Right. So let's go ahead and get started. So what you want to do now is you want to head on over to your settings.py file. I'm going to go to CRM, and you want to go to settings.py, and I'll zoom in here just for clarity. Okay, and you want to click here on the edit this file icon, right? And you can scroll down. Until you see the following settings. So we can leave debug to false, and we can just collapse this file tree, and let's zoom in a bit more. And under allowed hosts, you can remove that, and you want to set it to the domain that we have here. So the domain we have is the following, and you can just paste that in, and you just want to remove the HTTPS scheme like so. There we go. So you want to remove that, and you just want to make sure you have the following set into place. Then the next thing you want to do under CSRF trusted origins is you want to remove that comment. And now what you can do is with that scheme, you can just go ahead and copy the following under allowed hosts and paste it in like so. So make sure you've added the following in. So your allowed host will be that default domain name that you were assigned. And you just want to make sure that you go ahead and set your CSRF token so that you can submit your post request on your application. So once you've configured that accordingly, what you can do is you can go ahead and commit these changes and commit them. All right, we can then go ahead and head on to our repository. I just want to zoom out here. Okay, there we go. And of course, that deployment is going to take underway here. So we can see we have update settings here. Now that process is going to take a moment. So all we need to do is we just need to ensure that we are patient. And once it's been completed, we can go ahead and test our application properly. All right, so welcome back. So as we can see, our update deployed successfully here. So what we can do is we can just refresh our application. So remember, it's the same domain name, but if you just want to, for clarity, just to repaste it in again, you can, or refresh. And let's just test our application. So we want to see if we can make our post request now without any CSRF issues. So I'm just going to say test2 and add in the password. So we're just testing our application. So let's create an account. We should be able to send post requests. Yep, we can. So we can register. Let's enter in a username. Let's do that. So we just want to make sure our post requests work fine. There we go. Create a new record. So you'll test your own application. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to say Linus Smith smith@mail.com, and it's just add something. 1232 Alpine Drive, Cape, I don't know, we're gonna call it, yeah, Cape Town, Western Cape of Africa. Okay, and create record. Right, sign out, home. And there we go. So we can see we're making post requests to our application and it works just fine. All right, so that's how we can go ahead and deploy our application to Flow. So those are all the steps and everything into how you can do this. If you want to delete your resources, okay, all you need to do is, for example, the web app, you can go to settings and you can scroll down and delete your web application. If you want to delete your database, you can go back to your dashboard. So we can click on CRM application, which is the project name, and you can navigate here to the database. Settings, and delete your database. All right, so that's it for this video tutorial, guys. And as always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you next time. See ya.